I'm Candace Perry, 32, a resident physician in Bozeman, Montana. For 4 years, I sent my parents $2,000 every month, rent, medical bills, car repairs, you name it. A total of $24,000 a year straight from my paycheck, just to keep them comfortable. But on my wedding day, they never showed up. No call, no text, no explanation. My heart was pounding when I called, and my mom snapped, "Don't bother us." Those words hit like a slap. My hands were shaking as I hung up. I stood frozen in the dressing room, tears spilling down, then took a deep breath and made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. 30 minutes later, my phone was blowing up. My dad's voice cracked as he begged me to change my mind. I didn't. I had spent years believing that family means sacrifice. I worked overtime, skipped trips, and gave up things I wanted, all to cover their emergencies. They never once said thank you. My husband often asked, "Why do you let them use you like this?" I never had an answer. But standing there in my wedding dress, my mom's cold words echoing in my head, I finally realized I was exhausted from carrying it all. That was the moment I chose to end it. If you've ever had to choose yourself over family expectations, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. After that day, I couldn't shake the weight of those 4 years. Every month, I sent $2,000 to my parents, wired straight from my paycheck. Their rent in Bozeman, Montana was $700 due on the 1st, and I covered it without fail. When my mom's back pain flared up, I paid for her physical therapy sessions, $500 a pop, plus her prescriptions. Their old sedan broke down twice a year, alternator brakes, you name it, and I footed the bill another $300 each time. I even set up their internet and cable thinking it'd make their lives easier. But no matter how much I gave, they never said thank you. Not once. They'd text me a curt "money received" or call with another sob story, and I'd send more like it was my job. They acted like it was owed to them. My dad would call voice flat, saying their water bill was late again, as if I was supposed to know. My mom would hint at unexpected expenses, never explaining, just expecting me to handle it. I'd sit at my laptop after a long hospital shift, transferring funds, feeling the pinch in my own budget. I cut back on dinners, outskipped new clothes, worked overtime to make it all fit. They didn't care. To them, I was the reliable one, the one who'd always come through, no questions asked. It wasn't gratitude they gave me, it was silence. My sister Brooke was a different story. At 28, she was a star real estate agent selling million-dollar homes in Bozeman's booming market. My parents couldn't stop bragging about her. "Brooke closed another deal," my mom would say over dinner, her eyes lighting up. "She's going places." Meanwhile, I was the one paying their bills, but they barely mentioned my name. Brooke would breeze into their apartment with coffee or pastries, playing the perfect daughter while I was stuck wiring money from my couch. She never offered to chip in, not even a dime. Once I saw her pull up in a shiny new SUV, and my parents clapped like she'd won an award. I drove a 10-year-old Corolla. I tried talking to them years back. After a grueling shift, I called my dad, my voice shaking, and asked why they never acknowledged what I did. He brushed it off. "You're doing okay, aren't you?" "We need it more." My mom jumped in, saying, "Brooke's building her career. You're the stable one." Stable. Like I was a machine, not their daughter. I hung up my chest tight, but I kept sending the money. I told myself they'd get back on their feet, that this was temporary. 4 years later, I was still their bank. My husband Sean saw it early on. He'd watch me stress over their latest emergency, his jaw tight. "Why do you let them treat you like this?" He'd ask, his voice low, like he didn't want to push too hard. I'd dodge the question, mumble about family loyalty, but his words stuck. My friend Gloria, a lawyer in town, was blunter. Over coffee, she'd lean in, her eyes sharp. "They're using you, Candace. When was the last time they even asked how you're doing?" I couldn't answer. I'd change the subject, but her question lingered, piling onto the doubt I already felt. It wasn't just their questions, it was the little moments that cut deep. Like when my mom called, asking for an extra $1,000 for a specialist she wouldn't name. I was already stretched, picking up extra shifts to cover my own rent. I asked for details, and she snapped, "Why don't you trust us?" I sent the money anyway, hating myself for it. Another time, my dad needed new tires for their car. I paid, but when I visited, Brooke was there showing off her new designer bag. They didn't need me, they wanted my money. The guilt kept me trapped. Growing up, my parents hammered into me that family comes first no matter what. If I stopped helping, I'd be the bad daughter, the one who abandoned them. I'd lie awake wondering if I was wrong to feel used. Sean would hold me saying I deserved better, but I couldn't let go. I kept thinking if I gave just a little more, they'd see me. But they didn't. And that weight, that quiet ache, was all I had to show for it. The guilt still lingered, but I had bigger things to face. My wedding day was supposed to be perfect. Sean and I had spent months planning it, picking every detail for the small ceremony at a community hall in Bozeman, Montana. We rented the venue, a cozy space with wooden beams and soft lighting, and I handled everything: the caterer, the flowers, even the playlist. I sent my parents invitations weeks in advance, called to confirm they'd come, and offered to cover their gas for the short drive across town. They promised they'd be there, my dad's voice steady over the phone, my mom adding a quick, "Of course." I believed them. I wanted to believe them. So I stood at the altar in a white dress that took half my savings, scanning the crowd for their faces. They never showed. The ceremony went on. Sean's vows made me laugh through tears, our friends cheered as we kissed, but every few minutes I'd glance at the door. Nothing. By the time we cut the cake, my stomach was in knots. I slipped away to the hallway, dialed my mom's number, and held my breath. She picked up on the third ring. "Don't bother us," she said, her voice sharp like I'd interrupted something important. I froze the phone, trembling in my hand. "Mom, it's my wedding," I managed, but the line went dead. I stood there, veil slipping, feeling like the ground had vanished beneath me. Those 3 words burned more than their absence, more than anything. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. Something else took over, a cold, sharp anger I'd never felt before. I marched back to the reception, found my laptop in the bridal suite, and logged into every account tied to them. Their rent autopay canceled, the utility bills in my name disconnected, the credit card they used for groceries frozen. I called their landlord, gave him their number, and said I was done. It took less than an hour to unravel 4 years of support. Sean found me, his tie loosened, concern in his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked. I told him what my mom said, my voice shaking but steady. He pulled me close, said we'd figure it out, but I knew what I'd done was final. The next morning, a letter arrived at our house. Not a text, not a call, a handwritten note slipped under the door. My mom's slanted cursive filled the page, words dripping with venom. "You think you can cut us off? You'll regret this, Candace. We'll make sure of it." It wasn't a plea. It was a threat, vague, but heavy, hinting at trouble she wouldn't name. I read it twice. My hands clenching the paper, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and disbelief. They didn't just miss my wedding, they were ready to fight me for it. I showed Sean, and his face hardened. "This isn't right," he said, his voice low. "We need to do something." I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I drove to my grandmother's house, Lillian, the one person who'd always seen through my parents. She opened the door, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp at 70. I poured out the story: their absence, the phone call, the letter. Lillian's face tightened with every word. "They've gone too far," she said, her voice like steel. Without another word, she grabbed her coat and drove to my parents' apartment a few miles away in a rundown complex. I followed, my heart racing, unsure what she'd do. Lillian didn't knock. She stood outside their door, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Nancy, you should be ashamed," she shouted loud enough for neighbors to peek through their blinds. "You missed your daughter's wedding, and now you threaten her. You're no mother." My mom opened the door, her face red, stammering excuses, but Lillian didn't let up. "You've taken her money, her time, her heart, and you give nothing back. I'm done watching you hurt her." Neighbors gathered, whispering, as my mom shrank in the doorway. Gerald appeared behind her, silent, his eyes avoiding mine. Lillian turned to me, her expression fierce. "You did the right thing, Candace. Don't let them drag you back." I stood there, my anger mixing with a strange relief. For the first time, someone had said it out loud: they didn't deserve me. Lillian's words echoed in my head, drowning out the guilt I'd carried for years. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was done letting them win. A few days after she confronted my parents, I got a call from my bank in Bozeman. A teller, her voice hesitant, said someone had tried to access one of my old checking accounts, the one I'd used to pay my parents' bills years ago. They'd attempted a withdrawal of $2,000, claiming it was an authorized transfer. The bank flagged it. My name was on the account, but the ID didn't match. I knew instantly it was my dad Gerald or my mom Nancy. They'd always had access to that account back when I was sending money every month. I'd closed it after the wedding, but they must have thought they could still get in. The teller confirmed the attempt was denied, and I felt a cold knot in my stomach. They weren't just angry, they were desperate. That same evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide your secrets forever, Candace. Pay up, or everyone will know." My heart sank as I read it, the words blurring on the screen. Secrets I didn't have any, not the kind they could use. But the threat felt real heavy, like a shadow creeping closer. I showed the message to Sean, my husband, as we sat in our living room. His face darkened, his jaw tight. "This is harassment," he said, his voice steady but furious. "They're trying to scare you." I nodded, but my hands were trembling. What were they planning, and how far would they go? I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing. The message kept replaying, each word sharper than the last. I didn't know what secrets they meant, but the idea of them digging into my life, twisting something to hurt me, made my chest tight. I thought about calling them, demanding answers, but I knew they'd dodge or lie. Instead, I texted Gloria. She was at my house by morning, her laptop open on my kitchen table, her eyes scanning the message I'd forwarded. "This is serious, Candace," she said, her tone calm but firm. "They're crossing a line. We need to document this and start a legal paper trail." I felt a surge of relief mixed with dread. Legal action meant escalation, but doing nothing felt worse. Gloria laid it out clearly. She suggested filing a police report for the attempted withdrawal and the threatening text, then getting a restraining order if it continued. "You need to protect yourself," she said, her voice steady. "They're not just asking for money, they're trying to control you." I nodded, my stomach churning. The idea of taking my parents to court felt surreal, like a betrayal of everything I'd been taught about family. But Gloria was right, they weren't acting like family. They were acting like people who'd do anything to get what they wanted. Sean sat beside me, his hand on mine. "We're with you," he said, "whatever it takes." As we talked, I realized I had to come clean about something I'd kept quiet. "There's something you both need to know," I said, my voice low. I took a deep breath and told them about my secret savings account. For 4 years, I'd been putting away $200 a month, a small cushion I'd built to feel secure. It was now $20,000, tucked away in a separate bank, untouched. I'd never told my parents about it, not after they'd treated my money like their own. Sean's eyes widened. "You've been saving that while paying them," he asked, a mix of pride and disbelief in his voice. Gloria nodded, her expression sharp. "Good, that's yours, and we'll make sure they can't touch it." I explained how I'd started the account after my first year as a resident physician, scraping together whatever I could after their endless demands. It was my safety net, my way of knowing I'd be okay if things ever fell apart. Keeping it secret felt like the only way to protect it. But now, with their threat hanging over me, I wondered if they knew about it somehow. Was that the secret they meant? Or were they just bluffing, hoping to scare me into paying again? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but telling Sean and Gloria lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. They didn't judge me for hiding it. They understood. Gloria got to work immediately. She drafted a letter to the bank requesting a full report on the attempted withdrawal and started compiling evidence: the threatening text, the bank's call log, even the letter my mom had sent after the wedding. "We'll build a case," she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "If they try anything else, we'll be ready." I watched her, grateful but overwhelmed. The idea of my parents, my own flesh and blood, pushing me to this point felt like a bad dream. But I wasn't backing down. Their threats, their greed had gone too far. Sean stayed up with me that night, planning our next steps. We changed the passwords on all my accounts, added two-factor authentication, and checked my credit report for anything suspicious. Every step felt like locking a door they'd kept open for years. I was scared not just of what they might do, but of how this would change everything. Family wasn't supposed to feel like this. But as I looked at Sean, his steady presence grounding me, and thought of Gloria's fierce determination, I knew I wasn't alone. I'd spent years giving my parents everything. Now I was ready to fight for myself. A week after the threatening text, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. It was my Uncle Stuart, my dad's younger brother, calling from his home in Missoula. His voice was heavy, like he was carrying bad news. "Candace, we need to talk about your grandparents' estate," he said. I froze, my mind racing. My grandparents had passed years ago, and I'd assumed there was nothing left to discuss. But Stuart dropped a bombshell. They'd left a trust fund of $100,000 meant for me and my sister Brooke to split evenly. My dad Gerald was the executor, but he'd never told us. Not a word. I gripped the phone, my heart pounding. "How did you find out?" I asked. Stuart explained he'd been cleaning out his attic and found a box of old family documents. Among them was a copy of my grandparents' will naming me and Brooke as beneficiaries. There was also a letter from my grandmother urging us to use the money for our future's college, a home, a fresh start. Stuart had called the trust's bank to check its status, only to learn Gerald had withdrawn $10,000 2 years ago, claiming it was for family expenses. The bank records showed he'd forged my signature and Brooke's to get it. I felt sick, my stomach twisting with shock. My own father had stolen from us and kept it hidden. Stuart promised to send me the documents. By the next day, a package arrived at my house in Bozeman, stuffed with the will, my grandmother's letter, and bank statements showing the withdrawal. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the pages, my hands shaking. The letter was in her neat cursive, full of love and hope for us, but Gerald had betrayed that. He'd taken $10,000 money meant for my future and used it for who knows what. I called Gloria, my friend and lawyer, and showed her everything. Her eyes narrowed as she read the bank records. "This is fraud," she said, her voice sharp. "We can add this to the legal case." Sean, my husband, sat beside me, his face tight with anger. "They didn't just lie, they stole from you," he said. I nodded, too stunned to speak. The shock turned to fury the more I thought about it. For years I'd sent them money, thinking they were struggling while they'd been sitting on a secret trust fund. They'd let me drain my savings, work overtime, and stress over their bills, all while hiding money that was rightfully mine. I wanted to drive to their apartment, bang on their door, and demand answers. But before I could, my sister Brooke showed up unannounced. She pulled into my driveway in her shiny SUV, her face tense, her usual confidence gone. I let her in, my guard up, knowing this wasn't a friendly visit. Brooke sat on my couch, barely meeting my eyes. "You need to start helping Mom and Dad again," she said, her voice low but insistent. "They're in trouble without your money." I stared at her, my jaw tight. She didn't know about the trust fund yet. I hadn't told her, but her words hit like a punch. "They need it, Candace. You can't just abandon them." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Brooke, they've been lying to us. There's a trust fund, $100,000 from Grandma and Grandpa. Dad hid it and stole $10,000 by forging our names." Her eyes widened, but she shook her head. "That's not true. They wouldn't do that." I showed her the documents, the will, the letter, the bank statements. She read them in silence, her hands trembling, but when she looked up, her expression was hard. "Even if it's true, they still need help," she said. "You're the one with the stable job. Just send them money again." I felt a wave of anger, hotter than anything I'd felt before. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done. They stole from us, Brooke. They don't deserve a dime." She stood, her face flushed. "You're so selfish," she snapped, storming out, slamming the door behind her. The room felt heavy after she left. Sean put his arm around me, but I could barely feel it. Brooke's words stung, not because they were true, but because she'd chosen our parents' side even after seeing the truth. I'd spent years trying to keep our family together, but now I saw it clearly. They weren't my family anymore. Brooke's words cut deep, but the real blow was yet to come. Gloria and I decided it was time to make things official. We drafted a legal notice, a formal letter stating I was permanently cutting off all financial support to my parents. Gloria's firm hand wrote out every detail, the years of payments, their attempts to access my accounts, the forged signatures on the trust fund. We sent it certified mail to their Bozeman apartment with a copy to the bank and the police for our growing case file. It felt like drawing a line in the sand, one I wouldn't cross again. My heart raced as I signed my name, but there was no turning back. A few days later, I got a frantic call from Lillian. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger. "They were here, Candace," she said. "Your parents came to my house and went through your things." I drove to her place, my hands gripping the wheel, my mind spinning. Lillian lived in a small house on the edge of town where I'd stored some old boxes from my childhood books, clothes, keepsakes. When I arrived, the living room was a mess. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. My old journals filled with teenage thoughts were gone. A photo album with pictures of me and my grandparents was missing too. Lillian said she'd caught Gerald and Nancy rifling through the boxes while she was out getting groceries. They didn't even try to hide it, she said, her eyes blazing. They just left when I walked in. I felt a surge of violation, like they'd reached into my past and torn it apart. Those journals weren't valuable, but they were mine, private thoughts I'd never shared. The photos were irreplaceable memories of summers with my grandparents before everything went wrong. I called Gloria immediately, my voice shaking. She was furious, but calm, her lawyer's mind already working. "This is theft," she said. "We'll add it to the police report. They're escalating, Candace, but we're stronger." Sean, my husband, stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "They can't keep doing this," he said, his voice low but firm. I nodded, but the tension was suffocating. What were they looking for? And why take my things? That same evening, Brooke called me, her voice unsteady. I braced myself, expecting another argument, but she sounded different, scared. "Mom texted me," she said. "She told me to make you start paying again, or they'd make things hard for both of us." I pressed her for details, my pulse racing. Brooke forwarded the message. It was from Nancy's number, short and chilling. "Tell Candace to send the money or you'll both regret it." My stomach dropped. They weren't just coming after me, they were dragging Brooke into it, using her as leverage. I told Brooke to save the message and stay away from them. "I'm not giving in," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. She didn't respond, just hung up, and I wondered if she'd listen. The next morning, I went back to Lillian's to clean up the mess. As I sorted through the scattered papers, I found something I hadn't seen before, a small envelope tucked inside an old book. It was a letter from my grandparents addressed to me, written just before they passed. My hands trembled as I opened it. Their words were clear, full of love. They'd set up the trust fund to give me and Brooke a future, to make sure we'd never struggle like they had. They wrote that Gerald was only the executor, not the owner, and the money was ours alone. It was proof undeniable that they'd meant for us to have it. I clutched the letter, my eyes burning. My parents hadn't just hidden the trust, they'd betrayed my grandparents' wishes. I showed the letter to Gloria, who scanned it carefully. "This is gold," she said, her voice fierce. "It confirms everything Stuart told us. We'll use it to nail them." The tension in my chest didn't ease, but I felt a fire growing inside me. They'd taken my money, my memories, and now they were threatening my sister. I wasn't just fighting to protect myself anymore. I was fighting for what was right, for the legacy my grandparents wanted for me. Gloria called me a few days later, her voice urgent. She'd contacted the bank managing my grandparents' trust fund, and the news was both a relief and a shock. The trust still held $90,000 despite my parents' attempt to drain it. Gloria had dug deeper, working with a forensic accountant who found clear evidence of fraud. Gerald's forged signatures, not just mine and Brooke's, but also my grandmother's, used to siphon off the $10,000 years ago. The bank had frozen the account pending investigation, and Gloria was ready to push for criminal charges. "This is airtight," she said, her tone fierce. "They can't wiggle out of this one." I felt a chill, not just from their betrayal, but from the fear of what they'd do when cornered. I couldn't wait any longer. With Gloria's guidance, I filed for a restraining order against Gerald and Nancy covering both me and Sean. We sat in her office filling out the paperwork, my hands steady but my heart pounding. The forms listed their actions, the forged signatures, the threatening texts, the theft of my journals and photos. Every word felt like a step away from the family I'd once known. Sean sat beside me, his presence grounding. "You're doing the right thing," he said, his voice soft but certain. I nodded, but the weight of it all made my chest tight. What if they fought back? What if they found a way to hurt us? Brooke called me that evening, her voice shaking. I braced myself, expecting her to defend our parents again, but she sounded scared. "They texted me," she said, her words rushed. "They said if you don't drop the legal stuff, they'll make sure we both pay." She forwarded the message and I read it with a sinking feeling. "Tell Candace to back off or you'll both face consequences." It was from a new number, but I knew it was them. Nancy's sharp tone was unmistakable even in text. I told Brooke to save it for Gloria, but she hesitated. "They're still our parents," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't want to hurt them." I clenched my jaw, frustration mixing with fear. "They're hurting us, Brooke," I said. "You don't have to choose them." But she hung up, and I knew she wasn't ready to let go. The next day, Lillian called with her own update. Gerald and Nancy had shown up at her house unannounced, trying to talk their way back into her good graces. They'd stood on her porch pleading, saying they were misunderstood and needed her support to fix things with me. Lillian didn't open the door. "I told them to leave," she said, her voice like steel over the phone. "I won't let them use me to get to you." I could hear the pain behind her strength she'd raised. My dad loved him, but she couldn't excuse what he'd done. Her refusal gave me courage, but it also scared me. If they were desperate enough to beg Lillian, what else would they try? I lay awake that night, my mind racing with possibilities. The restraining order was a shield, but it felt fragile against their persistence. I imagined them showing up at my hospital, cornering me in the parking lot, or worse, targeting Sean. But every time the fear crept in, I thought of Gloria's determination, Lillian's defiance, and Sean's quiet support. I wasn't alone in this. I'd spent years giving them everything, believing it was my duty. Now I was done bending. They could threaten, manipulate, or beg, but I wasn't going back. Their desperation was clear, but justice was closer. A week after Lillian's refusal, Gloria called with news that stopped me cold. My parents, Gerald and Nancy, had been arrested at a financial services office in Bozeman. They'd tried to open a loan using a fake ID in my name, a clumsy attempt to bypass the frozen accounts. The police searched their car and found damning evidence, copies of the threatening letters they'd sent me, forged bank documents, and my stolen journals from Lillian's house. Gloria's voice was calm but triumphant. "This is it, Candace," she said. "We've got them." My heart raced, not with fear, but with a strange sense of relief. Their lies had finally caught up. I went to the police station with Gloria to give my statement. The officer laid out the evidence, every forged signature, every threatening note. I filed for a permanent restraining order covering me and Sean, my husband. The judge granted it the next day, citing their repeated harassment and fraud. It felt like a weight, lifting a door, closing on years of manipulation. Sean squeezed my hand as we left the courthouse, his eyes proud. "You did it," he said. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years, though a part of me still ached for what could have been. Days later, I learned Gerald and Nancy had been evicted from their apartment. They'd stopped paying rent months ago, relying on my money to cover it. With no funds and their legal troubles mounting, their landlord showed no mercy. I didn't feel joy at their downfall, but a quiet peace settled over me. They'd built their lives on deceit, and now they faced the consequences. I didn't reach out. I was done carrying their burdens. Lillian invited me to her house soon after. She sat me down at her kitchen table, her hands steady despite her age. From a small velvet box, she pulled out a delicate silver ring etched with tiny flowers. "This was your great-grandmother's," she said, her voice warm. "It's for you, for the family that stands by you." I slipped it on my throat, tight with emotion. It wasn't just a ring, it was a reminder of the love and strength I'd found in her in Sean and Gloria, the real family I'd chosen. With the trust fund finally released, I accessed my share $45,000 after Brooke's portion. Sean and I decided to renovate our small Bozeman home, turning it into a space that felt truly ours. We painted the walls a warm beige, replaced the creaky floors, and added a garden where I could plant flowers like my grandmother once did. Every hammer strike felt like a step toward freedom, a life no longer defined by my parents' demands. I walked through the finished rooms, my heart swelling with pride. This was mine, earned through years of standing my ground. Brooke, though, made her choice. She sent me one last text, short and cold: "I'm with Mom and Dad. Don't contact me." It hurt, but I wasn't surprised. She'd clung to them even after their threats and lies. I didn't reply, I let her go, knowing some bonds were too broken to mend. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also freeing. I'd spent years trying to hold my family together, only to realize I needed to protect myself first. Looking back, I learned a hard truth. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who respect you, who lift you up. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. I stood taller now, grounded by the love of those who mattered and the strength I'd found within myself.